It started with blood on the marble floor, just a single drop, bright against the white, like truth daring to speak in a place built on silence. No one screamed, no teachers rushed in, no justice came. But that day, a 16-year-old girl named Nia Carter stood up with split lips and steady eyes, and the whisper she uttered would echo far beyond the walls of her school. "You crossed the line," she said, and what happened next would unravel an empire of privilege, expose a system, and prove that the quietest voices often carry the sharpest truths. The blood didn't fall like rain. It drew itself, slow, deliberate, across the white marble floor of Stonemont Prep's east hallway, a ribbon of crimson curling like a signature no one wanted to read. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was quiet, precise, unforgiving. And Nia Carter didn't scream. She stood there, just barely, her legs shaking beneath her, one hand gripping the brass-trimmed edge of a locker for balance. Her blazer, navy blue with a gold Stonemont crest stitched neatly over the heart, was torn at the shoulder. Her lip was split. A thin stream of blood slid from the corner of her mouth, down her chin, and landed with a tap that echoed like thunder in her head. Across from her, Brandon Hale adjusted the cuff of his dress shirt, brushing a red smear from the knuckle of his right hand like it was lint. His expression wasn't angry. It wasn't even defensive. It was entitled, as if he were wiping off paint from a wall he owned. Behind him stood two shadows, Troy Langston, son of the school's wealthiest donor, and Caleb Dorsey, grandson of the state senator. They said nothing. They didn't have to. Their silence wasn't apathy. It was permission. Permission Brandon had always assumed he had. "You really should have just done the assignment, Carter," Brandon said, his voice low, casual, like they were discussing a missed homework deadline. Nia didn't move. Not yet. Her breath came in sharp, controlled pulls through her nose. One heartbeat, two. The marble beneath her sneakers was cold, and the scent of bleach and power clung to the air like perfume. She looked at him then, not up, not down, directly. Her eyes weren't filled with tears. They were steady, dark, burning. And when she spoke, it wasn't a cry. It was a sentence shaped like a warning. "You crossed the line," Brandon smirked. That same smirk he used when teachers laughed at his jokes, when he parked in the headmaster's reserved spot without consequence, when he leaned in during assemblies and whispered things that made girls flinch but never report. He opened his mouth to reply, but for a flicker, something shifted in his eyes. A pause, a twitch, a hesitation. Just for a second, the room tilted out of his control. Then it was gone. He chuckled again and took a step closer. "Is that supposed to scare me?" Nia didn't answer. Her hand, the one hidden beneath her blazer, slipped into the inside pocket. Her fingers brushed cool metal, flat, smooth, matte black. Not a regular phone, no brand, no logo. Just a single button at its center, pulsing with the faintest blue light. She didn't press it. Not yet. But Brandon Hale had just made a mistake. And Nia Carter never forgot a mistake. The rules at Stonemont Prep were never written on the glossy pages of the student handbook. They weren't displayed beneath the polished honor code plaques that gleamed in every hallway. And they certainly weren't recited during the weekly assemblies where the headmaster preached about merit, legacy, and leadership. But Nia Carter had learned them all the same. She learned them in glances, quick, dismissive, sideways, the kind that lingered just long enough to register as judgment, but never long enough to prove intent. She learned them in the way her calculus teacher, Mr. Wells, never once called on her, even when her hand was the first, sometimes the only, one raised. She learned them in red pen marks that bled across her essays with no comments, only points deducted. No matter how much research she poured in, how many nights she stayed up with index cards and highlighters, her grades always hovered just below excellence, not failing, but not good enough to stand out either. It was a system disguised as rigor, and it was never designed for someone like her to win. Stonemont Prep, with its ivy-wrapped arches and hushed, oak-paneled classrooms, was a breeding ground for dynasties. The kind of school that printed its alumni on Supreme Court benches, Senate seats, and Wall Street corner offices. Students didn't just walk its halls, they inherited them. And if you didn't come from a line that paid for a library wing or had a surname chiseled into the donor rotunda, then you were lucky to be there, which, in Stonemont's unspoken doctrine, meant you owed them something. Nia had arrived at Stonemont on a fall morning wearing a second-hand blazer and nerves packed tight behind a practiced smile. The scholarship acceptance letter her mother framed hung in their small apartment like a trophy. She'd believed, naively, that this place would be her door out, that her intelligence, her work ethic, her ambition would be enough to break the cycle. But it hadn't taken long to understand the truth. Here, brilliance didn't protect you. It made you a target. The first strike was subtle. During a team project for history class, Brandon Hale assigned Nia the research and the citations. Troy Langston sent her a shared doc titled Slave Labor, and laughed when she didn't. She did the work once, then never again. The second time, she refused. "I'm not your assistant," she said flatly, pushing her laptop shut. That's when it began. Her locker was vandalized the next morning, her books soaked in cranberry juice, her notes shredded and dumped on the floor. Later that week, a fake disciplinary slip appeared on her desk, listing infractions she'd never committed. When she brought it to the office, the secretary shrugged. "Oh, I thought you people were used to this kind of structure." You people. 3 weeks after that, Brandon slammed her against the wall outside the science wing. His smile was calm, practiced. "I told you, Carter, know your place." She didn't tell anyone, because she already knew what they'd say. She could hear the script before it ever left their mouths. "Are you sure? Maybe he didn't mean it that way. Maybe it was just a misunderstanding. These are serious accusations, Nia." No cameras covered the east hallway after fourth period. That was by design. Today, it had gone too far. Brandon's ring, his class crest, heavy with entitlement, had split her lip open. Troy and Caleb hadn't stopped him. Neither had the two teachers who had passed by right before it happened, eyes flicking forward like they hadn't seen anything. But Nia had felt every second, every breath between the moment Brandon raised his fist and the moment it landed. Every lesson she'd learned in this place hit her harder than his punch. She staggered into the girls' bathroom, her ears ringing, her fingers shaking as she turned the faucet on and tried not to cry. The blood swirled in the sink, bright against the porcelain. Her reflection looked back at her, dazed, damaged, but not defeated. Not this time. She left the sink running, walked, dazed but determined, back to her locker at the far end of the hallway. Her jaw ached. Her lips stung. Her heart thudded beneath her bruised ribs like a war drum. But she moved. Each step echoed louder than any protest she could have shouted. At her locker, she bent down, entered the code with trembling fingers, and pulled open the metal door. From beneath a stack of old notebooks and her extra gym shoes, she retrieved a small black box, plain, unmarked, the size of a glasses case. She hadn't touched it in over a year, hadn't even thought about it since the day her father placed it in her hand. "Only if you absolutely need me," he had said. "Not if you're scared. If you're cornered. There's a difference." At the time, she'd thought it was overkill. Typical Marcus Carter, military mindset for civilian problems. He always saw threats where she saw minor setbacks. The kind of man who still checked exit routes in restaurants and never backed into a parking spot without glancing in all mirrors twice. But now she understood. This wasn't a setback. This was war. She opened the case. Inside, nestled in a bed of matte foam, was a sleek black device. It looked like a phone, but there were no logos, no SIM slot, no app icons, just one solitary button in the center. It pulsed. Soft blue. Her father had called it the code red line. "It doesn't call me," he had said. "It signals the team. It puts things in motion." She stared at it, hand hovering above, because pressing that button didn't just mean help was coming. It meant everything would change. It meant her mother would be furious, that the peace they'd clawed together after her father retired would shatter, that whatever life he had disappeared into after he left the Pentagon would be ripped open again. But it also meant she wouldn't be alone. Not this time. The hallway outside was silent, but she knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. Brandon would return, with more jokes, with more arrogance. The administration would cover for him. The other students would stay silent. The bruises would fade. But the line he crossed would remain burned into her. Nia took a breath. Her fingers closed around the device. Not yet, but soon, because the rules of Stonemont Prep were built for people like Brandon. And Nia Carter? She was done playing by them. Nia Carter walked into Stonemont Prep 2 days after Brandon's ring met her face, and she felt like she was walking into a tomb, not because it was quiet, quite the opposite. The halls buzzed with the same tailored chaos they always did. Polished shoes tapping along the gleaming floors, students murmuring about SAT scores and weekend ski trips, laughter that floated like perfume down sunlit corridors. But something in the way the school breathed around her had changed. It wasn't silence that chilled her. It was awareness. People noticed her now, but not in the way she once hoped. Not with respect, not with curiosity, with something colder, a subtle recoil, a smirk hiding behind manicured fingers, heads leaned together in mock whispers, followed by knowing glances tossed casually in her direction. As if she were a disruption in the algorithm, as if bleeding in public had broken the illusion they needed to preserve. Brandon wasn't suspended. Of course not. No emails, no meetings, no warnings. He strutted past her in the hall the next morning, laughing at something Caleb said. His lip curled into a private smile the moment their eyes met, like a code only he understood. And Nia? She kept walking, not because it didn't hurt, but because she refused to give them the satisfaction of watching her break. Yet in truth, a piece of her already had. She could feel it in her bones. The part of her that once tried to fit in, to answer questions in class with careful tone, to straighten her posture so no one accused her of attitude, to say, "Sir," and "Ma'am," and apologize when she wasn't wrong. That part had fractured. And in its place, silence. But not the powerless kind. This silence had teeth. In her second period English class, Miss Albright read aloud from the Scarlet Letter, her voice syrupy and theatrical. Nia sat at the edge of the third row, her notebook untouched. Her eyes scanned the room instead. The way Troy Langston leaned back in his chair like he owned the air. The way no one dared meet her gaze except to stare when they thought she wouldn't notice. The minute the bell rang, she was out of her seat. And by lunch, she had a plan. It wasn't vengeance she was after. It was evidence. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory that night as she tore through her closet, pushing aside old jackets and shoes, until her hand found it, a small cardboard box, tucked into the back corner beneath a worn Stonemont hoodie. Inside, taped beneath the lining of a pencil case, was the device her uncle had given her last Christmas. He'd worked in IT for a private firm and called it a fun experiment, a micro camera, barely the size of a shirt button, with a wireless transmitter that could sync to any phone. She'd forgotten she had it. Now, it felt like destiny. The next morning, her old Hydromate water bottle came to school with her, its wide plastic walls tinted dark blue, the perfect shade to hide the tiny lens tucked into the side seam. Her phone buzzed once when she powered the feed-on recording. From then on, she didn't just survive the halls. She haunted them. But it hadn't always been like this. There was a time, weeks ago, maybe months, that she still held out hope, that if she worked hard enough, smiled politely enough, earned her place enough, someone would see her as more than a scholarship girl with excellent diction and skin 2 shades too dark for the donor luncheons. But then came the locker. She could still remember the sting as she pulled her curls free from where they'd been taped across the locker hinge, strands ripped out by force, left dangling like some grotesque display. The note had said, "Gravity, defying magic." Some laughed. Others pretended not to see. And when her textbooks went missing before finals, no one questioned why they turned up in the boys' bathroom. They laughed at her voice. "You sound like an audiobook," someone had said. As if eloquence were offensive, as if confidence was aggression, as if showing up every day with her head held high was a crime worth punishing. So now she watched. She listened. She documented. Mr. Wells pretending not to see Brandon kick her backpack down the science hallway. The lunch attendant passing her the smallest portions on the tray. The custodian calling her trouble under his breath when he thought no one could hear. She caught it all. Every glance, every word, every act too small to report, but heavy enough to bruise. It didn't make her feel powerful, but it made her feel prepared. And that, more than anything, was something they'd never wanted her to be. That afternoon, the library was nearly empty. Just a few seniors reviewing for college interviews and a pair of underclassmen whispering over biology flashcards. Nia sat alone at the back table, her laptop open but untouched. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as her eyes darted between the feed from her water bottle cam and the folder of clips she'd already organized. There was enough for a case, almost. But almost wasn't good enough. She was about to close the window when a voice beside her made her jump. "You're sitting in the only spot with decent Wi-Fi that doesn't smell like moldy paperbacks and entitlement." Nia turned. The girl standing beside her had a mess of copper curls, wide-set green eyes, and freckles scattered across her cheeks like a constellation someone had tried to connect with a pencil. She wore a hoodie over her uniform blazer, an offense that usually earned a warning unless your last name paid tuition in cash. "I'm Savannah," she added, pulling out the chair next to Nia without asking. Nia blinked. "New?" Savannah grinned. "Transferred last week. Lucky me." Nia nodded slightly, unsure. Most students introduce themselves with a resume, legacy info, last vacation destination, family occupation. Savannah didn't. She just opened her laptop, tapped a few keys, then leaned closer and whispered, "I saw what they did to you yesterday." Nia froze. Her throat tightened. "What are you talking about?" "The hallway, Brandon Hale, and your face." Her voice didn't shake. Her gaze didn't flinch. "I didn't record it," Savannah added, "but I wish I had." Nia studied her. For once, it wasn't a stare that tried to reduce her. It was the first look she'd gotten in a long time that said, "I see you." And for the first time, Nia let herself exhale. Just a little, not all the way, but enough to say, the ghost in the halls had just been seen. Savannah Moore didn't walk like a new kid. She strolled, as if the rules of Stonemont Prep didn't apply to her, or worse, she knew they did and just didn't care. On her third day, she sat cross-legged on the library windowsill with her boots propped up and her earbuds only half in, playing music loud enough that the lyrics could be heard between the rows of encyclopedias. When the librarian shushed her, Savannah had nodded, turned the volume up, and winked. She didn't dress to impress. She wore hand-painted patches on her blazer and scribbled quotes along the canvas strap of her bag. She carried a cracked leather notebook with no name, just a single embossed phrase across the front, "No light without heat." Nia noticed all of this within a day. But what stuck with her the most was Savannah's gaze. It didn't roam, it locked. She didn't look through you or past you, she saw you. Like she was constantly taking mental notes for a story she hadn't decided whether to publish yet. And that made Nia nervous, because she'd spent so long fading into walls, slipping between shadows, becoming the girl no one truly saw. Until now. "I saw what they did to you," Savannah had said, sliding her phone across the library table like a truce offering. Nia didn't touch it. Not yet. "What exactly did you see?" "Enough to know you didn't slip," Savannah replied. "Enough to know they've been doing this for a while. You've got the look." Nia raised an eyebrow. "The look?" "The look of someone who's been eating injustice for breakfast and trying not to choke on it." Savannah leaned back. And trust me, I know it well. Oh, that was when she told Nia about her father. Daniel Moore wasn't just a journalist, he was a wrecking ball with a pen. His expose on the McKenna campaign in Georgia had taken down 2 state senators and a super PAC that funneled dark money into private school charters for political favors. Savannah had been there for all of it, listening through walls, editing late at night, watching their apartment get broken into, and their dog poisoned. She learned early, truth has enemies. Especially when it's inconvenient. We moved after someone keyed "snitch family" into our car and dumped dead possums in the yard, Savannah said, her voice matter-of-fact. Mom wanted us to disappear into suburbia. Dad wanted me to keep my head down, but I don't do that very well. She paused, then added softly, "And neither do you." Nia didn't answer right away. Her fingers curled around her water bottle, still warm from her hand, the hidden lens within it quietly, recording this very moment. The silence between them thickened, but it wasn't awkward. It was heavy, like 2 people silently deciding whether to leap off the same cliff. Finally, Nia reached into her bag. She pulled out her phone, unlocked it, and tapped a folder named simply "Proof." She turned the screen toward Savannah. The video played without sound at first. A classroom, viewed from a low angle, the hidden camera's eye from the water bottle on her desk. In the frame, Brandon leaned back, whispering something to Caleb, who snorted. Miss Daly, the literature teacher, sat at her desk, flipping through papers. Then, as Brandon's voice kicked in, Nia raised the volume. "Let's see how far little Miss Quota can ride that scholarship," he said, loud enough for the front row to hear. Miss Daly laughed. Not a shocked laugh, not a nervous laugh, an agreeing one. She should be grateful. Honestly, it's adorable how hard she tries to sound like us, the teacher added, her smile smooth, her tone syrupy. Caleb chimed in. "Yeah, it's like watching a chihuahua do calculus. It's almost inspiring." More laughter. Nia stared at the screen, expression unreadable. Savannah didn't laugh. She didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. Instead, she whispered, "Holy hell." Then she said something else. Quiet, sharp, and dangerous. "Let's burn the whole place down." They spent the next 2 hours whispering in corners and passing notes back and forth like middle school conspirators. But their words weren't innocent. They were surgical. Savannah's mind worked in headlines and red lines. She thought in patterns, how corruption hid beneath paperwork, how cruelty disguised itself as culture, how silence passed down like family heirlooms. She took Nia's evidence and broke it into categories. Asterisk, racial microaggressions, staff. Asterisk, peer harassment, with staff complicity. Academic bias patterns. Administrative deflection tactics. Asterisk, financial traceability through donor influence. "I've seen this structure before," Savannah said. "It's not just toxic, it's engineered." Nia blinked. "You think they're planning this?" Savannah shook her head. "Not in writing, that's the trick. They build it so nothing looks intentional, but everything functions exactly as it should." "And what do we do?" Savannah looked up, her eyes gleaming. "We expose the system, not just the bullies, the architecture. Because that's the story no one's brave enough to print." Nia leaned back in her chair, heart pounding. She hadn't expected an ally. She certainly hadn't expected a revolution, but here it was. Sitting in front of her, freckled, fearless, and already sketching battle plans in a spiral notebook that looked like it had survived a hurricane. And somehow, for the first time in what felt like months, Nia didn't feel like she was drowning alone. That night, in her bedroom lit only by the soft glow of her desk lamp, Nia sat on the floor, surrounded by textbooks she wasn't reading and homework she wasn't doing. She replayed the clip on her phone again. Miss Daly's laugh, Brandon's words, Caleb's snort. Quota girl. She'd heard worse. But it was different, this time, because now she had it on tape. And now, she wasn't the only one watching. The screen dimmed, and her reflection stared back at her. tired, bruised, but burning, not just with anger, with purpose. She tapped the screen, rewound the footage, and handed the phone to Savannah the next morning before homeroom. Savannah pressed play, watched in silence, and when it ended, she nodded slowly and said, "Well then, looks like we've got our first match to light." The button was no larger than a thumbnail, pulsing softly in the dark like a heartbeat on standby. Nia Carter stood in the center of her bedroom, the device cradled in her hands like it might burn through her skin. The room around her was quiet, too quiet. Not even the old radiator groaned like it usually did at night. Outside, the Chicago wind pressed against the windows with its usual urgency, but Nia barely noticed. Her breath trembled, her fingers hovered. Then, with a single push, she ended the silence. The light blinked once, then turned solid blue. Message sent. Code red. She didn't cry, she didn't pace. She sat and waited. Thousands of miles away, buried in the chill of northern Montana, the cold crept beneath the cracks of a remote log cabin nestled in the Bitterroot Mountains. The man inside had grown used to silence, not the peaceful kind, but the purposeful kind. The kind that came after too many battles, too many briefings, too many truths that couldn't be shared without consequences. Colonel Marcus Carter hadn't worn a uniform in over 4 years. He'd traded war rooms for wood carving, strategy maps for silence. His days passed slowly now, between chopping firewood, reading dog-eared spy novels, and pretending that he wasn't still a weapon waiting to be called. He was sitting at the workbench, smoothing the edge of a cedar figurine when it happened. The satellite phone didn't ring, it didn't buzz. It simply lit up, a single notification in the center of the matte black screen. Code red, Nia. The carving knife slipped from his hand and landed point down in the wood like a stake through the heart. He didn't move for 5 seconds. Then he stood, not with panic, with precision, like an engine reigniting after years buried under frost. He crossed the cabin in 3 strides and opened the cabinet beneath the sink. Behind a false wooden panel, embedded into the back wall, was a hidden keypad. He tapped in a 6-digit code without hesitation. The panel clicked open. Behind it, a black steel case waited, dustless, sealed, heavy with history. Marcus pulled it free and laid it on the worn kitchen table. Inside, a secured tablet, encrypted files, a flash drive, and a small laminated photo of a 12-year-old Nia smiling in front of a science fair project titled "The Physics of Falling Stars," scrawled in thick ink across the back, "Protect at all costs." The phone buzzed again, this time with coordinates, auto-synced to a military-grade satellite Nia didn't know, still tracked her. Marcus tapped a series of commands into the tablet, waking up dormant networks. Then, without ceremony, he opened a separate device and sent out a signal. 1 sentence, 1 target audience. "They touched my daughter." He didn't need to say more. By midnight, 4 old contacts had responded. Asterisk Reyes, ex-Navy SEAL, turned systems analyst. Location received. What's the op? Asterisk Kimura, ex-Delta Force intelligence. Time and place, I'm in. Asterisk Morgan, former military field investigator. Let's remind them who we are. Asterisk, and Doc, they're off the books medic. Packing now. I'll bring the kit. Marcus Carter hadn't seen these men in 5 years. They didn't ask why he vanished, or why he was calling now. Because when the ghost general whispered into the dark, you didn't ask questions. You moved. He left the cabin before dawn. No note, no hesitation. Just boots, gloves, a loaded duffel, and a voice message on his landline in case his neighbor came looking. Gone to settle an old promise. He drove through the blizzard like it owed him nothing. The meeting point was an abandoned ranger station 20 miles south. By the time he arrived, the team was already waiting. No greetings, no stories, no claps on the back. Just a grim understanding. These were men with scarred knuckles and sharper minds, men who'd ghosted presidents and undone coups without leaving fingerprints. Marcus spread the dossier on the table like a general laying out a battlefield map. "Stonemont Prep," he said. "Suburban Chicago. Looks clean on the surface. Wealth, reputation, donor lists longer than most congressional committees." He tapped a school photo of Brandon Hale, son of the mayor, immune to consequences. He's the hand. Then Caleb Dorsey. Troy Langston, senator's grandson, developer's heir, the arm and the shield. He pulled out the faculty roster, highlighted names. Principal, complicit, staff, passive, board members, bought and paid for. They built a system that's so polished it reflects nothing. But I have surveillance, names, gaps in their armor. He opened a second folder. This one was thinner, but heavier. Inside, property records, black budget payouts, board meeting transcripts, historic grade disparities broken down by race and income level. Some pages had redacted names, others had annotations in Nia's handwriting. "She started building a case," Marcus said, "without training, without backup. She did this on instinct." Morgan whistled low. "That's your kid, all right." Marcus didn't smile. "She's holding the match. Our job is to shield the flame." Kimura nodded. "We go public?" Marcus' eyes narrowed. "We go surgical. We document. We connect the dots. We don't scream, we show. Show how the money flows. Show how justice is mocked in hushed meetings. Show what happens when a kid tries to learn and is told to bleed quietly." Reyes leaned forward. "And the endgame?" Marcus tapped the photo of Nia. Then the laminated message, "Protect at all costs." She wins. Back in Chicago, Nia couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, eyes wide in the dark, replaying everything. Savannah's words, Brandon's voice, the laughter of her teacher. The water bottle sat by her desk, lens blinking faintly. Her phone had buzzed once. No number. Just a message. Message received. 36 hours. "Don't escalate. Document everything. Trust me, Dad." She read it 5 times before turning off the screen. There was something terrifying about being believed. Something even more terrifying about what belief could summon. She sat up, reached for the bottle, whispered to no one, "I'm not alone anymore." And in Montana, the ghost general zipped up his pack, opened the steel case one last time, and stared down at the face of his daughter, bruised, brilliant, unbowed. Protect at all costs. It was no longer just a promise. It was the beginning of a war. There's a certain kind of silence that doesn't come from stillness. It comes from strategy. And now, Nia Carter was learning how to master it. The kind of silence that walked beside her every time she crossed Stonemont's marble floors with her chin high and her fists clenched behind her back. The kind that curled in the corners of every hallway conversation the moment she passed by. The kind that didn't scream at you, but smothered. But silence also had cracks. And Nia had finally found a way to slip through. The plan was Savannah's. Of course it was. It came to her over lunch, spoken in a whisper beneath the hum of the cafeteria's ancient ceiling fans, and the drone of other students pretending not to stare at Nia's still-fading bruise. "We need ears," Savannah said. Nia blinked. "We have the water bottle cam." "That's eyes," Savannah replied, biting into a cold turkey wrap like they were planning a sleepover, not espionage. But power doesn't always show itself. Power whispers. "We need to catch the whispers." Nia stared at her, half in awe, half in fear. "We're talking about bugging the principal's office." Savannah grinned. "Exactly. The opportunity came on a Wednesday, just after 4th period. Mrs. Ellison's secretary, Miss Raines, stepped out for her regular 15-minute smoke break behind the faculty parking lot. Savannah timed it like a heist, down to the second. They knew Ellison was in a meeting with the athletic director, conveniently across campus in the gymnasium. It was the only time the office would be empty. Nia had never moved so fast in her life. She and Savannah slipped down the administrative hallway, blending into a pair of seniors supposedly delivering yearbook mock-ups. Nia's heart thudded like a drum solo in her chest. She could feel the sweat pooling behind her neck, the weight of fear pressing hard behind her ribs. She wasn't scared of getting caught. She was scared of what they might hear. Savannah crouched behind the receptionist's desk and pulled out a tiny device the size of a paperclip, something her father had gifted her for fun the same year he was nominated for a Pulitzer. She stuck it beneath Mrs. Ellison's desk, right under the panel of drawers. "Transmits to the app," Savannah whispered. "Encrypted signal. Auto-syncs to both our phones." Nia stood watch by the door, blood thumping in her ears. When Savannah finished, she rose slowly, brushing her skirt back into place like it was just another Tuesday. "We're ghosts," she said. They were halfway down the hall when the gym doors opened and Ellison's voice echoed from the stairwell. They didn't run. They didn't even look back. They walked calmly, like ghosts. That night, the recording started at 7:42 p.m. Nia was sitting on her bed in sweatpants. Savannah on the floor with her laptop open, legs crossed, a half-eaten bag of pretzels between them. The app buzzed once. Live audio stream detected. They stared at each other, frozen. Then Savannah tapped play. At first, it was shuffling. Chairs. The click of a pen. Then a voice, clipped, nasal, familiar. "Mrs. Ellison, I'm telling you, Richard, if we don't get ahead of this, it'll grow teeth." "That girl is too visible now." Nia's mouth went dry. Then another voice, smoother, older, touched with arrogance like a cologne. "Mayor Hale, Brandon's father. You're overreacting. She's just noise. A scholarship kid with a chip on her shoulder and a few lucky clicks. Her lucky clicks include video of my faculty laughing at a racial slur, then bury it. It's not that simple." The more girls connected. "I did some digging. Her father exposed a sitting governor. They're not amateurs." Savannah glanced up at Nia. "Told you," she whispered. "The restructure plan needs to move up." Ellison continued. "We phase out the merit-based scholarships. Slowly. Publicly, we call it a financial redirection towards sustainability. Privately, we target the troublemakers. And the Carter girl? Let her finish the year, but isolate her. If she pushes again, we trigger the conduct clause. 3 strikes. Expulsion." Nia's hands trembled. But she didn't drop the phone. She didn't even blink. "We can't afford another Jasmine Richardson," Mayor Hale muttered. "That case cost the district 6 figures in hush money." "I'm not interested in round 2, Ellison said. "Then cut the root before it spreads." Click. End of stream. The silence afterward was louder than anything they'd just heard. Nia sat frozen, eyes fixed ahead, like if she moved, the world might collapse. Savannah reached for her hand. Didn't say anything. She didn't have to, because in that moment, Nia didn't just feel violated. She felt named. She wasn't an accident. She was a target, and they were building a machine to erase her. The next morning, Stonemont was as pristine as ever. Nothing in the sunlit glass atrium suggested a conspiracy, but Nia walked through the doors differently. Her steps weren't hesitant. Her shoulders were squared. Her water bottle swung gently at her side, recording every glance, every smirk, every fake smile. She was no longer documenting abuse. She was building an archive of corruption. Every class was an opportunity. Every lunch period, a potential minefield of microaggressions. She noticed things she hadn't seen before, how Miss Clark always called on white students first, how Coach Dyer gave Brandon a smirk and a pass when he skipped drills, how the student aid forms for scholarship students were kept in a locked cabinet no one had the key to. It wasn't just about her anymore. It never had been. And now she had proof. But just as she was starting to feel the fire return to her veins, it happened. 7th period. Literature. They were dissecting the crucible. Ironic, really. Nia sat in the back, scribbling notes and pretending to be present. Miss Beck, a teacher who rarely spoke unless called upon, walked past her desk as she collected essays. She didn't say anything, just paused, slipped a flash drive onto Nia's open textbook, and kept walking. No eye contact, no nod, nothing, just 5 words. barely whispered under her breath, "You're not the only one recording." Nia's breath caught. She didn't move for a long time, not until the bell rang and the class spilled into the hallway. She held the drive in her palm. Small, ordinary, potentially explosive. And suddenly, she understood. The system wasn't just cracking, it was starting to bleed. Chicago looked different through the tinted windows of a black SUV with no license plates. The skyline still shimmered in its cold steel glory, but Marcus Carter wasn't here for the view. He was here to wage a quieter war, the kind that didn't leave rubble, but revealed it. The SUV took a hard turn off Lakeshore Drive and slipped into a narrow alley between two shuttered factories. At the far end stood a derelict freight elevator, its rusted doors half covered in graffiti. A single red light blinked above the keypad. Marcus stepped out of the vehicle without a word, his duffel slung over his shoulder. He keyed in a code that hadn't been used in years. The elevator responded with a groan, then opened to reveal a space far too clean to be abandoned. Polished concrete, LED panels humming overhead, security cameras nestled discreetly in the corners. No signs, no emblems, just utility and silence. Inside, 3 men waited. They didn't salute. They didn't smile. They nodded. That was all. Morgan, the analyst turned field investigator with eyes that missed nothing. Kimura, soft-spoken but lethal, now a private sector ghost. And Reyes, the hacker who once crashed a black market weapons ring using only a drone and a diner Wi-Fi. Marcus set his duffel down, unzipped it, and pulled out the laminated photo of Nia. He placed it on the center of the table like an artifact from a fallen temple. "This is the mission," he said. No one questioned why. No one asked for context. Because when the Ghost General called a meet, you didn't come for closure. You came for fire. "Her name's Nia," Marcus began, his voice low, deliberate. 16, student at Stonemont Prep. Attacked, silenced, marked for removal. Kimura leaned forward. "You think they'll expel her?" Marcus shook his head once. "I know they will. Not officially. Not for the right reasons. But they'll dress it up in policy. Code of conduct violations. Classroom disruptions. It'll be clean. Just like they've done before." No. He pulled out a slim file folder, one Savannah had helped compile over a series of late-night calls. Inside, board meeting transcripts, scholarship rosters, video stills from Nia's hidden camera footage, and handwritten notes detailing every suspicious incident from the past 3 months. Reyes whistled low. "She's been doing recon?" Marcus nodded. "On her own." Pride flickered in his chest, sharp, painful, humbling. "She's better than most field agents I trained," he said, voice rough with emotion he didn't have time to show. Kimura cracked open a laptop and began sifting through the data. "She's documenting bias, power abuse, funding fraud. Jesus, these aren't isolated cases. This is a system. And it's being protected," Marcus said. "By money, by legacy, by silence." Morgan lifted an eyebrow. "So what's the play? Exposure? No retaliation?" Marcus said. "We don't break doors. We open windows. Let light in. Quietly, thoroughly. They think they're invisible. We make them transparent." By midnight, the team was fully operational. Morgan mapped out the school board's donor patterns over the last 10 years. Kimura infiltrated the back end of Langston Development's project submissions to the city. Reyes tapped into open-source city surveillance data, cross-referencing traffic logs and meeting schedules. It was surgical. They weren't soldiers now. They were surgeons. And then the needle slid in. "Got something," Kimura muttered. He turned his screen to show a trail of transactions, a series of 6-figure philanthropic donations earmarked for Stonemont's scholarship fund, rerouted to shell companies. All tied back to Langston Holdings, to real estate empire owned by Troy Langston's father. "Here's the kicker," Kimura said. "Langston Holdings just submitted a bid for the West Campus expansion. Construction project valued at $14.2 million. Reyes added. "And guess who chairs the approval committee?" "Mayor Richard Hale," Marcus said darkly. "Brandon's father. Morgan's jaw tightened. They're laundering influence through the school. Through my daughter's school, Marcus corrected. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of calculation, of restraint barely held in check, of men who had toppled regimes abroad and were now being asked to take apart one right in their own backyard. Then Reyes froze. He leaned forward, fingers flying over the keys, eyes narrowing. "What is it?" Marcus asked. "I set up a tracer to flag sensitive audio from City Hall," Reyes said. "It just pinged conference call on an encrypted channel. Mayor Hale, Principal Ellison, and 2 unidentified officials. I'm patching it in." He clicked. The room filled with static, then voices, broken but intelligible. "We can't afford the optics," someone said. "The footage is out there. We don't know who she shared it with. Ellison, her behavior fits the definition. We trigger the clause. Disruption, harassment allegations, whatever we need. Just make it airtight." "When?" A pause. "Tomorrow morning." Marcus stood slowly, his jaw clenched. His eyes didn't blink. "She's not ready," he whispered. Then louder to the team, "They're making the first move." Reyes looked up from his screen, jaw tight. "We just intercepted a City Hall conference call," he said, repeating it as if the words might hit harder the second time. "They're planning to expel Nia tomorrow." For a second, no one moved. Then Marcus turned to the photo on the table, the one with Nia's bright eyes, before the bruises, before the camera, before the silence. He didn't rage. He didn't shout. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a sealed envelope. One word written across the front in ink that hadn't faded: contingency. He stared at it, then slid it onto the table. "We go now," he said. "No more waiting. We bring everything. We bring the truth. And we bring it before they bury her." Because this wasn't just a school. It was a machine. And the general had just found its power source. Some trap don't use bait. They use truth. And sometimes, the ones who fall into them never hear the snap until it's too late. That night, Nia Carter moved through Stonemont like a shadow wearing borrowed light. The school was different after dark, quieter, emptier, but not peaceful. The silence here didn't rest, it listened. Every footstep echoed too loudly. Every creak of wood and whir of security lights pulsed like the breath of a building that knew it was being watched. Savannah waited outside the student council room, her phone clutched in one hand, a small black pouch in the other. Inside the pouch, a lipstick-sized spy cam, fully charged, with live stream capability, courtesy of one of her father's old colleagues, shipped in a coffee tin 2 days ago, with a note, "For when they think no one's watching. Go," Savannah whispered. Nia didn't hesitate. She slid into the student council room with a key card borrowed, stolen, from a careless sophomore who left it taped under his desk with the words, "Just in case," scribbled in Sharpie. The room was spotless, too spotless. One wall held plaques of past student presidents, all smiling white faces framed in gold. The far wall had a whiteboard still scribbled with meeting minutes, Spirit Week, prom committee, budget requests for varsity warm-ups. Nia moved straight to the back bookshelf and crouched low. Savannah had scoped the room earlier and identified a perfect angle between a dusty thesaurus and an old volleyball trophy. From there, the camera would capture the full room, faces, voices, the smug circle of privilege in motion. Click. Camera armed. Nia stood, brushed imaginary dust from her knees, and walked out without a sound. The next morning, Brandon Hale arrived early. Of course he did. Golden Boy always made sure he was seen arriving early, looking busy. Optics were everything. He walked into the council room with Troy Langston and Caleb Dorsey in tow. Same khakis, same swagger, same assumption that the world bent just far enough to avoid hitting them. The footage was already rolling. "She's trying to take us down with some diversity sob story," Brandon said, tossing his bag onto the table. "It's pathetic." Have you seen her little activist friend, the redhead?" Caleb asked, laughing. Looks like she edits blogs in a basement and owns 3 cats named after dead poets. Troy snorted. I heard Carter's dad is some kind of ex-military freak. Maybe she's planning a coup. If she is, Brandon said, she's forgetting the golden rule. People like us don't get expelled. People like her get made into examples. She'll trip, Troy added. They always do. Or, Brandon said with a smirk, we make her trip. Silence. Then laughter. The kind that curdled. The kind that didn't need words to finish the sentence. The camera caught it all. And this time, Nia wasn't the one who needed to scream. The truth would do it for her. While the video uploaded to their encrypted server, Nia changed out of her school uniform and into something sharper. A navy blue turtleneck, black slacks, silver earrings her mother had given her for her 15th birthday. She was arming herself, not with fists, with presence. She didn't go to the front office that morning. She didn't need to. She knew what was coming, and someone else had just stepped in to hold the door open. At precisely 10:13 a.m., a dark sedan pulled into the circular drive of Stonemont Prep. It didn't belong there. It didn't idle. It arrived. Marcus Carter stepped out wearing a charcoal suit, tailored to the kind of man who didn't need labels. His tie was pinned precisely. His shoes shined like the memory of a better world. He walked into the school with his back straight, not with arrogance, but with the calm threat of competence. He wasn't here to intimidate. He was here to observe. That's what men like him did before they struck. The receptionist looked up from her computer, blinking behind thick glasses. Good morning, Marcus said with a soft smile. I have an appointment with Principal Ellison. She hesitated. I don't see it on the schedule, sir. I called yesterday. I'm considering a large donation to the school's endowment program. She asked me to stop by. The word donation worked like a master key. Oh, of course. One moment. Oh. 3 minutes later, Principal Ellison appeared in the doorway of her office like she'd just swallowed a lemon. Mr. Wells? Marcus lied smoothly. Alexander Wells. He offered his hand. She shook it like someone gripping a live wire. Of course, Mr. Wells, please come in. Her office was everything Nia had described, framed degrees, an ironic "Equity Starts Here" poster, and a mahogany desk clean enough to reflect your own hesitation. They talked for exactly 13 minutes. Marcus asked no real questions. He let her fill the space with rehearsed pleasantries and strategic flattery. She spoke about alumni pride, rising academic standards, the challenges of balancing tradition with innovation. He nodded, smiled, mentioned strategic investments in youth leadership, said he was looking for schools that reflect moral clarity. Her eye twitched, just once. Then he stood. Well, he said, this has been enlightening. He shook her hand again, a little firmer this time, and as he stepped into the hallway, the air shifted. He walked past a student-led tour, past the librarian who looked up a beat too long, past Brandon Hale, who passed him without recognition, and yet flinched. And just before he reached the glass exit doors, he turned to the front desk. The receptionist looked up again, flustered, unsure. Marcus leaned in, smiled like winter. Tell her, he said softly, the general was here. Then he walked out, as quiet as he'd come. But the building would remember him, because every system, no matter how polished, knows when a predator has entered the ecosystem. And Marcus Carter didn't knock on doors. He dismantled hinges. The morning sky over Chicago broke pale and cold. A hush stretched over the city like the pause before a scream. Inside Savannah Moore's bedroom, its walls papered with political posters, vinyl stickers, and half-written poems, truth waited inside a blinking cursor. She sat cross-legged at her desk, hoodie sleeves pushed up, her fingers hovering above the keyboard. Nia sat beside her, heart racing louder than the traffic outside, her eyes fixed on the open video editor like it was a detonator. I've titled it, Savannah said. Nia looked up. Savannah turned the screen. The words glowed on a black background. The scholarship girl, they tried to erase. Nia's throat tightened. There was something chilling in how accurate it was, how effortlessly Savannah had named the thing Nia hadn't been able to say out loud. Not punished, not silenced, erased. "Are you sure?" Nia whispered. Savannah didn't hesitate. They started this war. Now they can watch what happens when a girl stops running from fire and becomes it. With one final breath, Savannah pressed upload. The video went live at 6:17 a.m. By 6:28, it had 212 views. By 7:03, the first comment appeared, "Why is no one talking about this?" By 9:12, it had over 40,000 shares. By noon, it broke 1 million. The video was raw. There were no dramatic cuts, no flashy edits. Just the footage Nia had collected over weeks: hallway harassment, whispered slurs, faculty laughter, and finally, the student council room confession. Brandon's voice rang loud and clear through the speakers. "People like us don't get expelled. People like her get made into examples." The screen cut to Principal Ellison's voice on the intercepted recording. "We trigger the clause. Disruption, harassment allegations, whatever we need. Just make it airtight." Then a freeze frame. Nia's face. Not bruised, not broken. Just looking straight at the camera. Defiant. Alive. The caption at the end read, "Her name is Nia Carter. She's 16. She earned her seat. They tried to erase her, but she recorded everything. And now, so will we." Underneath, a single hashtag pulsed like a battle cry. Number Justice for Nia. It exploded across platforms like wildfire, licking dry timber. Students from other schools began commenting with their own stories. Parents started tagging the district's Board of Education. Alumni of Stonemont, some decades removed, publicly demanded answers. Journalists messaged Savannah for interviews. A local podcast host called it the digital Molotov cocktail no one saw coming. Within 6 hours, the story was picked up by 2 national news outlets, and a verified teachers' union account shared the video with the caption, "This isn't about one student, it's about all the ones we failed." Nia watched from the edge of Savannah's bed, her knees pulled to her chest, her phone lighting up every 3 seconds with new mentions, shares, alerts. She felt dizzy, not triumphant, not even safe, just suspended. Like she was standing in the eye of a storm she'd helped summon but didn't yet understand. At Stonemont Prep, the air changed by second period. Whispers ran through the halls like electricity with no source. Students stared, murmured, nudged each other. The Wi-Fi was slower than usual, overloaded from every phone, tablet, and classroom monitor trying to load that video. Brandon Hale sat in the back of Mr. Lockwood's economics class, scrolling through his notifications when his jaw went tight. His name was trending for all the wrong reasons. Screenshots of his smirk mid-confession were already meme-ified. "People like us don't get expelled." Caption, "Wanna be it?" Troy and Caleb passed him anxious glances, but no one dared speak. Mr. Lockwood just kept teaching, though his voice trembled on every third word. In the faculty lounge, Principal Ellison stared blankly at her inbox. Subject lines stacked like a slow, suffocating avalanche. Asterisk. Urgent. Media request. Regarding student allegations. Asterisk. From board president. Please address crisis immediately. Asterisk legal. We need to talk. Today. The world was knocking on Stonemont's gates. And this time, the locks weren't strong enough. Elsewhere, Marcus Carter sat alone in a quiet room above a closed boxing gym on the south side of the city. The space was a ghost of a past life. Dusty floor mats, old punching bags, yellowed photos of champions long since forgotten. The tablet on the table glowed with the open video, paused on Nia's face. He had watched it 5 times, not because he needed to, but because it reminded him of something he almost lost: hope. This wasn't the daughter he had trained to survive. This was the daughter who had learned to fight, not like him, but beyond him. She'd used no fists, no fury, just facts. And that terrified people more than firepower ever could. His burner phone buzzed. No caller ID. Just a single message. Secure line. Patruzeci, she cinch seconds. Don't speak until I say go. He answered. The line clicked, went silent. Then a soft female voice came on. Clear, measured, controlled. Colonel Carter? Yes. My name is Special Agent Dana Wexler. Office of Civil Rights, U.S. Department of Education. A pause. We've seen the video. Your daughter's documentation aligns with multiple prior complaints previously dismissed. Another pause. We are opening a federal inquiry into Stonemont Prep. Marcus didn't respond right away. His throat tightened, not with emotion, but with the sheer weight of movement. The machinery of a system long dormant was stirring. And this time, it wasn't here to protect the powerful. We'll be in touch, Wexler said. Off the record, Colonel. Tell your daughter. She's not alone anymore. Click. Silence. Marcus sat back slowly, exhaling a breath he hadn't known he'd been holding for years. He didn't smile. Not yet, but something in his eyes lit, sharp, steady, and ancient, like a fuse touched to dry kindling. The storm didn't arrive with thunder. It came with sirens low and steady, a synchronized choreography of black Suburbans and federal agents in tailored suits. It didn't shout. It didn't ask. It entered. At precisely 7:48 a.m., 3 buildings across Chicago were breached, each a pillar of the same rotting structure: the mayor's office, Langston Holdings, and Stonemont Preparatory School. The agents moved with crisp efficiency. No chaos, no delays, just warrants, signed, sealed, executed. And behind each folder of paperwork was the full weight of the federal government. The first camera to catch it was a traffic drone hovering over City Hall. The footage showed Mayor Richard Hale being led out of his office, his face flushed, not with shame but disbelief, as if justice were something that happened to other people. Not him. Not here. At the same moment, downtown, federal investigators walked calmly into the marble lobby of Langston Holdings. William Langston, patriarch of the empire, stood frozen beside his receptionist as agents swept past him with quiet purpose. The elevator dinged. The conference room was sealed. Computers were bagged. Phones confiscated. Security footage pulled. In the west wing of the building, a mural depicting the legacy of Langston was covered with protective sheeting as they dismantled the foundation one file at a time. And at Stonemont Prep, the ivory tower cracked. It began when 2 SUVs rolled up the school's circular drive, unannounced and unapologetic. Students clustered near the windows, whispers caught like static through the hallways. Then came the silence, the kind of silence that precedes a verdict. Principal Ellison was in the middle of a scheduled meeting with the board chair when the agents entered. They didn't knock. They didn't wait. "We have a federal warrant," the lead agent said. "Step away from your computer." By the time her hands touched the air, her career was already over. In the office next door, the IT administrator tried, unsuccessfully, to disconnect the server. The agents moved faster. They had names. They had keywords. They knew what to find. In the second-floor chemistry lab, Brandon Hale sat staring at his phone as the video of his own voice looped across the internet. The meme of his quote, "People like her get made into examples," was now being printed on protest signs outside the school gates. He didn't notice the principal's voice over the intercom until it was too late. Effective immediately, Brandon Hale, Troy Langston, and Caleb Dorsey are suspended pending investigation. The classroom went still. Not a gasp, not a murmur. Just relief. Troy stood up too fast. Caleb's pen clattered to the floor. Brandon didn't move at all. Because this time, the world was watching. And it wasn't flinching. By noon, news vans lined the street outside Stonemont. Reporters spilled onto the sidewalk. Drones buzzed overhead. Protesters held handmade signs above their heads like shields. Silence is violence. No more erased voices. We believe Nia. Inside the school, students were called in one by one for interviews. Some shook, some confessed, some finally spoke after months of pretending nothing was wrong. The mask was slipping, and behind it wasn't chaos. It was clarity. Nia sat quietly in the library, her water bottle still on the table beside her, though it was no longer recording. She didn't need it to. The world had taken over that job now. Across from her, Savannah typed furiously. The second post was already underway, this one not just about Nia, but about every student who'd ever been punished for speaking the truth too soon. She was compiling stories, uploading testimonies, highlighting the pattern that had always been there beneath the gold-framed awards and polished glass trophies. "I think we hit the foundation," she muttered. "Now we let it fall." Nia didn't answer. She was staring at her phone. A text had come through from an unknown number. "You did it. Dana Wexler, Office of Civil Rights." Nia read it twice, then slowly turned her phone over, screen down. Because she knew better than to celebrate too soon. An hour later, Principal Ellison stood outside her office, holding a manila envelope with shaking fingers. Her resignation letter. She didn't wait for the board to request it. She knew. She signed it with ink that smudged slightly at the edge, one of the few times her perfectly controlled signature had ever faltered. As she walked down the marble corridor, once her dominion, now her exile, teachers parted to the sides like waves receding from shore. No one stopped her. Because when the ivory tower collapses, even the ones who built it quietly find the exit. Outside, the crowd swelled. Cameras flashed. Voices overlapped. The moment had arrived. And though she hadn't asked for it, they asked for her. Nia Carter stood on the school steps as the crowd parted. Her blazer was buttoned. Her posture was straight. Her expression unreadable. A sea of microphones rose toward her like a congregation before the altar. Someone asked the question, inevitable, obvious, soaked in well-meaning ignorance. "Nia, what do you want now that you've won?" Nia blinked. Her gaze swept the crowd, past the cameras, past the teachers who once looked through her, past the students who had only now remembered how to listen. Then, softly, without flinching, she spoke. "We haven't won." A beat of silence. She raised her eyes toward the building behind her, the school that tried to erase her, and the world that had let it happen. "We've just started." And with that, she stepped down from the stone steps, away from the microphones, the questions, the flashbulbs, toward the truth that would not retreat. The halls of Stonemont Prep were quieter now. Not the silence of fear or complicity, it was something different, something unfamiliar. Watchful. It had been 4 weeks since the collapse. 4 weeks since Principal Ellison had walked out with her resignation letter folded like a white flag. Since Brandon, Troy, and Caleb had vanished from the roster, their names scrubbed from every hallway trophy case like stains wiped clean with expensive cloth. And still, the building stood. But it no longer stood tall. It stood aware. Inside the main conference room, once reserved for donor banquets and gilded strategy sessions, papers shuffled, pens scratched, and power shifted in its seat, learning how to sit differently. This was where the new rules would be written. Literally. On a long walnut table, a rough draft of Stonemont's restructured code of conduct was spread open, covered in red ink and typed amendments. The gold-embossed binder had been tossed into the trash. No more legacy language, no more vague lines like behavior unbecoming or disruption of classroom harmony. Nia Carter sat at the far end of the table, spine straight, eyes calm but sharp. Her fingertips lightly touched the page in front of her, the one that replaced "Zero Tolerance for Misconduct" with something far more dangerous to abusers. "Zero tolerance for silence." To her left sat Mr. Grant, the interim principal, a man who once let silence do the speaking for him. Now, he carried a pen with a quiet kind of gravity. He didn't speak often, but when he did, he looked only at Nia, as if seeking permission from the student who had done what an entire system could not. Across from Nia, Savannah scrawled notes furiously, already planning the next wave of public transparency, anonymous testimony channels, third-party ombudsman contact, whistleblower resources. She didn't believe in change without paper trails. Her father had taught her that the hard way, and beside her sat two students Nia barely knew a month ago. One was a sophomore from the robotics club. The other, a junior who once switched schools because of a hate-fueled hazing incident. They'd both volunteered to serve on the oversight committee. Both had been passed over until now. Now they weren't just seen. They had vote. It hadn't been easy. Change never is. There had been resistance, mumbled comments from legacy parents in PTA meetings, stiff emails from trustees warning about the school's image, veiled threats hidden behind smiles. One parent asked if the new policies would mean kids like Nia would now have too much say, to which Nia replied, cool and steady. If kids like me means students who report racism, bullying, and misconduct, then yes, we're not asking for say, we're demanding it. They hadn't responded, just adjusted their blazers and looked away. The hardest part wasn't exposure, it was the rebuild. It was the line-by-line revisions of policies so expertly written to sound inclusive but function as armor. Language like academic discretion became measurable academic criteria. Phrases like student reputation were struck entirely. Disruption now had to be defined, cited, and evaluated by a rotating committee, not a single administrator. Every term was held up to the light. Every word was remeasured through the lens of justice. And, as the days passed, a quiet realization grew around the table. This wasn't reform, this was reclamation. Late one afternoon, after the third review session that week, Nia lingered in the conference room, her hand resting on the updated draft. Mr. Grant approached quietly, a cup of tea in one hand and a paper in the other. "I wanted you to see this," he said. Nia looked down. It was her new student profile, revised, corrected. Her academic record now reflected her real GPA. The conduct notes had been deleted, along with the baseless allegations that once threatened her expulsion. The file ended with a single note from the Oversight Committee. Student demonstrated resilience, leadership, and integrity in the face of institutional adversity. Recommendation: leadership placement. Nia stared at it for a long time. It wasn't praise she sought, but after everything they'd done to twist her reflection into something smaller, something manageable, this single page felt like armor returned to its rightful owner. She didn't say thank you. She didn't need to. "Mr. Grant just nodded, placed the tea on the table, and left her in the quiet she had earned. She found out later that the student body had unanimously nominated her to serve as head of the new Student Advisory Board, not because she had demanded it, not because she was the loudest, but because she had stayed when they tried to silence her, and in doing so, she had taught others how to speak. The first meeting was scheduled for Friday. She hadn't told her mother yet, not because she was hiding it, but because she wanted the words to be said face to face. With the same quiet strength her mother had passed down to her on nights when dinner was cold and the world was cruel, she rehearsed what she'd say while walking past the freshly repainted lockers. The chipped metal had been cleaned, the tape residue from old slurs gone. New signs lined the walls. "Your story matters, we're listening." She didn't love the font, but the message, that was hers. As she turned the corner toward the east stairwell, she heard footsteps behind her. Quick, light. A voice, barely above a whisper, cut through the air. "Hey!" Nia paused. A younger girl, maybe a freshman, stood at the top of the stairs. Her eyes wide behind thick glasses, her uniform slightly too big. She clutched a book to her chest like a shield. Nia smiled gently. "Hey," she said back. The girl hesitated, then stepped closer. And with all the courage her small voice could hold, she whispered, "Because of you, I stayed." Nia didn't know what to say. Her throat tightened, her heart cracked open and reformed in the same breath. She placed a hand on the girl's shoulder. Gently, "You shouldn't have to stay for anyone else," she said softly. "But I'm glad you did." The girl nodded once, then disappeared down the hall. Nia stood there for a long time, staring at the empty stairwell. It wasn't victory she felt. It was responsibility. And that feeling? That was louder than any applause. The auditorium lights dimmed to a soft amber, casting warm halos on the wooden floor and the polished brass railing that wrapped the stage like a quiet reminder. This space used to belong to someone else. Now, it belonged to a girl who once bled in silence. Every seat was filled. Parents, teachers, students, journalists, board members. Even a few state education officials who never used to return emails unless a donor's name was CC'd. They all sat there, facing the podium, waiting for what came next. A single microphone stood at the center of the stage. It was the same mic Nia Carter once stood behind months ago during an assembly where she was never acknowledged, never called upon. The same one she'd looked at like a locked door. Tonight, she would not ask for the key. She was walking through it. Behind the curtain, her fingers brushed the edge of the note card she had written and rewritten half a dozen times. It was blank now. She had thrown the draft away 10 minutes earlier, just before stepping into the green room, because her voice didn't need scripting anymore. It needed remembering. She stepped forward. Her heels tapped softly against the polished stage as she approached the podium. She didn't hesitate. Not this time. Not anymore. The room fell silent. Not the forced kind, not the ceremonial hush. This was earned silence, the kind that made space, the kind that listened. Nia looked up. The crowd blurred, but not from fear. Her heart was steady. Her breath was even. She placed her hands on the edge of the podium and spoke. "A few months ago, I stood in this same building. I didn't say anything then, not because I didn't have something to say, but because I thought no one would listen. And if I'm being honest, I didn't know if my voice would matter." She paused. Let that truth land. It wasn't a confession, it was a declaration. I was wrong, not because my voice was louder than theirs, but because truth is louder than power when you don't run from it. And courage doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means you speak anyway. Murmurs, eyes shining. Somewhere in the fourth row, Miss Beck, the quiet literature teacher who once slipped Nia that flash drive, wiped a tear from the corner of her eye. Nia continued, her voice strong, unapologetic. "This new policy we're introducing today? It's more than paper, more than procedures. It's a mirror held up to a system that told kids like me, be grateful to be here, stay quiet, don't make trouble." But what they called trouble was actually truth. And truth should never be punished. Someone in the back stood, then another, and another. It wasn't a standing ovation. It was an uprising, not of fists, of feet, of people saying, "We're here, we hear you, keep going." "I'm not a hero," Nia said, her voice soft now, "and I don't want to be one. I'm just a girl who stopped accepting silence as safety. I'm here because my father taught me what justice looks like. My mother showed me how strength can whisper, and a friend reminded me that telling the truth is not a threat, it's a beginning." She looked down, then back up, locking eyes with a freshman near the front, the same one who had once whispered, "Because of you, I stayed." Nia smiled, just a little. This school doesn't belong to legacy names. It doesn't belong to donors. It belongs to us. Every student who was told to shrink, every voice that was filtered out of history. This isn't the end of something broken. It's the start of something better, and we will write it together. She stepped back from the mic. There was no pause, no hesitation, just thunder. Not the weather kind, the kind that rises from below, from feet pounding floors, from hands clapping so hard they sting, from voices shouting names not because they're famous, but because they matter. Nia, Nia, Nia. And in the crowd, Marcus Carter stood silent, still. His face unreadable, but his eyes were wet. Beside him, Savannah turned, her voice choked with quiet awe. "She did it," she whispered. She actually did it. Marcus didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on the stage, on the girl who had carried truth through fire and refused to flinch. Then, softly, just loud enough for Savannah to hear, she didn't need a rescue. She became one. The door to the student advisory board room creaked slightly as it opened, just enough to remind Nia Carter of all the doors that had once been closed to her. But this one didn't slam shut. It stayed open, waiting, welcoming. She stepped inside, notebook in hand, the warmth of late morning sun pouring through the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the quad. The same quad where she'd once walked with her shoulders tucked in, her voice folded so tightly inside her that it almost forgot how to unfold. Now, she didn't have to be smaller. The long conference table gleamed beneath the soft light. Around it, the other student representatives were already seated, some nodding, some standing as she entered. None of them glanced at her with doubt. None of them flinched. She took her seat at the head of the table. No one questioned it, because they all knew what it had cost her to sit there. The meeting began the way most do, with hesitation. But it didn't last. Ideas poured in, changes debated. One student proposed a new peer mediation program. Another read aloud from a letter written by a freshman whose harassment report had once been lost in the shuffle. They spoke of safe spaces, teacher accountability, racial equity in grading systems. No one was silenced. Every voice mattered. And when Nia spoke, the room listened. Not because she raised her voice, but because her presence carried the weight of a generation that had learned to speak only when screaming was the last option. This board isn't just about policy, she said. It's about protection, of dignity, of belonging, of truth. We're not here to patch the cracks. We're here to build something new, so no one else has to bleed just to be seen. A beat of silence, then nods, then resolve. That afternoon, in a cafe tucked between a used bookstore and a newsstand, Savannah Moore tapped her fingers against the rim of a coffee mug. Across from her sat a man with graying stubble and ink-stained fingers, Daniel Moore, her father. "You're sure?" he asked, his voice rough from years of late nights and buried truths. Savannah didn't blink. "I want in." He looked at her, the weight of too many headlines behind his eyes. "This isn't student council. This is exposure. This is subpoenas and buried files and people who will come after you if you get too close." Savannah's eyes gleamed. "Good," she said, "because I'm planning to get close." She slid a folder across the table. Inside, copies of enrollment data from 5 private schools, anonymous whistleblower notes, and a timeline connecting suspicious scholarship cuts to land rezoning deals. At the top of the file, one name had been circled in red ink: Langston Holdings. Daniel exhaled, his lips curling into something between pride and caution. "You get one story wrong. I won't." Savannah cut in. He leaned back, then nodded slowly. "Then let's write the one they never wanted printed." Meanwhile, Nia walked the hallways of Stonemont, like someone who had always belonged there. Only now, she didn't just walk. She paused. She stopped when she saw a teacher brush off a student's question. She lingered when she passed lockers once tagged with tape and slurs. She smiled at the sophomore who once avoided her eyes, now waving shyly like a new beginning in a school blazer. Power didn't radiate from her. It echoed behind her. The kind that doesn't need to be announced because it's already remembered. And on her way to the library, she passed the empty office where Principal Ellison once ruled with invisible ink. The door was cracked open now. The new administrator, Miss Walker, was inside, reviewing notes with the counselor who'd previously been too afraid to speak. Progress is slow, but silence now had competition. Later that day, Nia stood alone in the top-floor hallway overlooking the campus quad. The sun had begun its descent, casting golden light across the trees, lining the edge of the field. The glass was warm beneath her fingertips. Outside, students moved in every direction, some laughing, some lost in headphones, some clutching binders too full of equations or dreams. But they weren't looking over their shoulders anymore. Something invisible had shifted, and yet, something remained. Not all wounds heal in public. Some stay beneath the skin, reminding you why you fight, why you stay, why you don't go quiet again. Nia closed her eyes for a moment. The weight of everything, the meetings, the whispers, the fire and fallout, settled behind her ribs like gravity. But it didn't crush her anymore. It grounded her. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out. A message. There's a school across the river. Same problem. Different names. They want to meet you. S. She didn't answer right away. She stared out at the school she had changed. The one that had tried to silence her. The one that taught her what it meant to be invisible, and what it cost to be seen. She leaned her forehead gently against the glass and whispered, voice low but sure, "This place tried to silence me. Now I speak for those they never saw." And behind her, the sun kept rising. Because this wasn't her ending, it was the beginning. For all of them. For every erased voice, for every child still waiting for the world to listen. Sometimes, the loudest voices begin as whispers. And sometimes, a girl who once stood alone in a hallway, wiping blood from her lip beneath the gaze of a school that didn't want to see her, becomes the very voice that cracks the ceiling wide open. Nia Carter never asked to be a symbol. She didn't seek attention, or headlines, or revolution. All she wanted was to belong, to walk into a room without having to shrink to fit it. But the world rarely changes for those who stay quiet, and so, one day, she stopped shrinking. She recorded the slights. She stood when it would have been easier to sit. She dared to believe that truth, when held up like a mirror, could shake even the oldest walls. And it did. But maybe what matters most isn't what she exposed. It's what she taught us. That courage isn't always loud. That justice doesn't always wear armor. That the smallest flame can burn down centuries of silence. If someone dares to keep it lit. In your life, maybe you've seen a Nia. Or maybe you are a Nia, sitting quietly in a classroom or workplace or home where you've been told, subtly and systematically, that your voice is too much or not enough. That you should wait your turn. That your truth is inconvenient. To you, we say, speak anyway. Because every time someone like Nia rises, she carries others with her. The quiet kids, the unseen ones, the fighters in disguise. And one day, someone will whisper to you the same words Nia heard in a hallway filled with echoes. Because of you, I stayed. If this story moved you, if it made you remember someone you know, or someone you once were, don't let it stop here. We'd love to hear your voice in the comments. Your thoughts, your story, your spark. Because that's how movements grow, one truth at a time. And if you're still here with us, still feeling the weight of this journey, consider staying for the next one. There are more stories to tell, more voices to raise. Because silence may be inherited, but so is resistance. And we've only just begun.